Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Dynasty Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined as always by Scott Bogman and Pat Fitzmaurice. Fellas, we've got an easier show today. There wasn't a lot of heavy lifting on the prep. It wasn't a lot of, I need you guys to show up with 10 players that fit X, Y, or Z. Today, we're kind of taking a bit of a step back, looking at it from more of a macro level view and giving our best pieces of advice for rebuilding managers. Now, even if you are a contender right now, I would recommend listening to the episode because A, you can maybe learn something about how the rebuilding managers in your leagues are trying to think of things, and B, you will probably be rebuilding one day. That's the nature of Dynasty. So hopefully this is an episode that can be of some assistance to everybody listening, but we are specifically owning in on moves that every rebuilding team, we think, must be making as they enter this season and throughout this season here in 2024. So like I said, it basically is what it sounds like, general advice for rebuilding teams. A quick note that all of our 2024 consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. You can also navigate to our staff dynasty rankings on the site as well. We will get started right off the top. Fitz, what is your kind of first, and these are in no particular order, by the way, but what is your first piece of advice to rebuilding managers?
Pretty obvious one. It's collect draft picks. And so in the one dynasty league that I am commissioner of, we had an orphan team. Someone just said they want to step away from fantasy football entirely. Someone gave up all their dynasty and redraft teams. And the friend who took it over, who had never played dynasty before, like I was explaining the concept to him, he was very into it. So I'm like, okay, before you decide, look over your roster and let me know if you want to do this. And he looked it over, and this team was not like a total dumpster fire. It was in okay shape, but probably not an immediate contender. He said, yeah, I want to do this, but I just want to ask you first. I want to sell everything that isn't nailed down for draft picks. Is that okay? I just don't want to feel like I'm, people think I'm dumping and trying to give valuable pieces. I'm like, that's exactly what you should be doing. Good job. Like that he was able to quickly deduce that situation. Now, I could just as easily say trade for young players with plausible upside, but sometimes other managers have attachment to their young players, those types of players. Like maybe they hit on a 4th round pick and now it's a young player who might start to be more involved in his offense, and that fantasy manager wants to go along for the ride and see where it goes. Or maybe someone had an especially shrewd FAAB expenditure that led to what might turn out to be a nugget of gold. So with draft picks, on the other hand, they're just numbers. People still value those draft picks, of course, but some people might even cling more tightly to them than others, but those draft picks don't have identities. It's, you don't develop an emotional attachment to pick 207. So, like if you make a fair offer and trade some of your older vets, like you can acquire these draft picks, and that gives you that charts a course for you. Getting those extra picks gives you young pieces to build around, and hopefully some of those pieces hit for you and give you cornerstones.
Yeah, one of the nice things about collecting draft picks is that even if you let's say you're rebuilding and you somehow accidentally luck into a winning season. I thought I was rebuilding in our work league last year. I had Tua as a quarterback, start off really hot. I had Zach Moss start off really hot. All of a sudden, I was kind of in the playoffs. I still collected all these draft picks over the previous years. So even though I finished 3rd in the league last year, like very unintentionally, I like having draft picks was still of value to me. Like even if you kind of have to change your strategy and your timeline, it's still just a benefit to have. And draft picks by and large just go up in value. Like even like not maybe in the 4th and 5th rounds, but like if you're sitting there like in the 2nd or 3rd round, regardless of what people said, like, oh, this is a strong class, oh, this is a weak class, like it's very likely somebody in your league will be interested in that pick when you're on the board in rounds like 2 and 3. So they only go up in value. They benefit you no matter where you are in your process, even if you kind of fluke into a better season than expecting. So it might be a little obvious, but like I don't think you can emphasize it enough, just how much value there is in that for rebuilding teams. Bogman, what's your approach here?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely in trading those picks. And I think what Fitz said, there's a movie called Choke. I don't know if you guys have seen it. Is a book also. But the premise is this guy is a huckster and he would act like he's choking. Someone would come save him. And there's this weird psychology of when you save someone, now you want to see how that person is doing and make sure they're doing okay. So he would, act like he's choking at all these restaurants, get all these people to send him money and talk about his plight. And he was just a huckster. I think the same mentality goes into when you spend those draft picks, when you draft that player. And that's why Fitz said, I could have said, go get young players, but we become emotionally attached to those players. We want to see it through to the end because we drafted them. So I think snapping up picks always way easier. So I completely agree with Fitz's first point here.
Bogman, what's your kind of first piece of advice for rebuilding managers?
It's on how are you going to get those draft picks? You're going to trade aging vets. That's the best way to do it. And for me, when you look at quarterback, it's guys like Rodgers, Cousins, Stafford, Geno, Carr. It doesn't mean that these guys are dead in the water or they may not be good next year, but they are not part of your long-term plans. When you look at running backs, Derrick Henry, obviously, Kamara, Nick Chubb coming off the injury. If Austin Eckler is good, maybe you can flip him for something. James Conner, Aaron Jones. I think these are some guys. And then there's good wide receivers, and the wide receivers last longer. So it's harder to trade these aging wideouts because they may last a little bit longer than you think. But Kupp, Adams, Evans, Diggs, Keenan Allen, Calvin Ridley, these are the guys. And then the tight ends, we all know the names here. It's Kelsey, Andrews, Kittle. Even Ingram, I think, is 29 or going to be 29 this season. So move those guys, collect as many picks as you can. And I wouldn't say negotiate with one person, put it out and see who needs these and try to create a bidding war for your players, especially if you're in season and these guys are performing well. Then you really want to get off of them because their value is going to be at its peak.
All right, Fitz, what is your second piece of advice for rebuilding managers?
Follow a BPA strategy in rookie drafts. BPA is standing for best player available. And so play the percentages, go with the safe play, the sure thing. And by all means, do not draft for positional need when you are in a rebuild. Positional balance should really be the last of your concerns. And I'll give you, for instance, a couple of years ago, I was invited to do a mock rookie draft with, really good friends in the dynasty industry who have a great show. And they had 12 people who also do dynasty content. And, we walked through this mock draft and talked and debated over picks. And with my first round pick, I took Jamar Chase. And one of the other guys on the show, who's like one of the best dynasty minds in the business, was talking about why he would have taken Zach Wilson with that pick, and talking about the importance of quarterback in superflex leagues, which of course, like that is, and I think he might have used this phrase, that is the currency of superflex, like the quarterback position. But I was so sure that Jamar Chase was a can't miss wide receiver prospect, and I had no idea what to make of Zach Wilson as a quarterback. Like I thought he had real issues. Just like playing in that gimmicky system he played in at college. I didn't know how that was going to translate. So like if I was rebuilding, that would be a no-brainer. I'm taking the sure thing with Chase. Now it turned out it was like I was right in that little argument, but the other guy had a fair enough point. But it's just like this year I faced kind of a similar dilemma where I don't know if I'm in a full rebuild or kind of a retool, but after a bad year, I have the number 2 pick. And I took Marvin Harrison over Jaden Daniels. And even though I'm really starting to warm to Jaden Daniels and think he has a bright outlook and I've even taken him as my quarterback 1 in some redraft leagues this year. Like, I just think Marvin Harrison Jr. is can't miss. And I don't know about that with Jaden Daniels. Like, I don't want to go belly up with a quarterback when I could have had a guy who I'm convinced is going to be a wide receiver 1 or at least a high-end wide receiver 2 for like years to come. So BPA, don't take unnecessary risks in your rookie drafts when you are rebuilding.
You did hit on this. I was going to ask as a follow-up if quarterback is an exception to the rule. And the way I would kind of frame that is it is impossible to get good quarterbacks in Superflex. They are never cheaper than they are in your startup. And then it is very difficult to get really great quarterbacks unless you have an early pick, which ideally you don't want to have too many years in a row. So, like, obviously a scenario like that, it worked out, like Chase over Wilson, clearly the right move. And even this year, like, okay, Marvin Harrison Jr., we're talking about a guy that we've called generational. Like, I think it's totally reasonable to take a guy of his ilk ahead of a quarterback that you're not as big a believer in, even though we do like Jane Daniels and Drake May. But having said all that, like,
let me ask you
like,
guys this.
if you don't have a quarterback, there's kind of no way to get one.
Yeah, let me turn the tables on you guys. Say you're in a complete tear down rebuild, no chance to contend in 2024. You've got the 201. Would you rather have Lad McConkey or Bo Nix?
So in that year, I'd easily say Lad.
Yep.
Yeah, I would say Lad too, and I'd say the exception, to the rule is Superflex, but not in a rebuild. So if you're in a rebuild, you're not planning on winning this year. The quarterback isn't going to make or break your team. So take the sure thing, right? If you're one piece away, or maybe in your case, someone is hoarding quarterbacks, so you can take a quarterback and trade him for a better player than is in the draft, which is tough this year because this draft is so good. But if you can do that, those are exceptions to that rule. But if you're in a rebuild, it's BPA all day, every day. I agree 100% with Fitz.
So what's interesting to me is that the examples we've used are quarterback and wide receiver, both of whom tend to have long shelf lives. What if you're talking a quarterback in a super flex versus a running back? Because if you're saying, let's pretend they were the same class. Let's say it was like Drake May and Bijan in the same rookie class. We're really convicted that Bijan is a special running back player. He's the best player available, even though we like Drake May. But Drake May, by the time you're ready to compete, if you're looking at it like a 2 or 3 year rebuild, you're completely tearing down. Drake May will be into his prime by the time you're ready to compete, whereas Bijan might be on the back end of his prime. Like, that's the nature of running backs. Like, obviously, we hope he has a longer career than that, but that's possible with any running back. So in that kind of extreme scenario, just because running back careers are shorter and their primes are shorter, would you consider the other way? Or is it still, even in that scenario, just take Bijan because you're getting RB1 in Dynasty, even if the long-term value is maybe with QB9 in Dynasty or wherever we think May would end up?
I'm still taking Bijan there.
Okay.
It's, like we talk about the average shelf life for a running back in the NFL and how it's like, whatever it is, 3.2 years or something like that. But I think it's longer for the very tip top prospects. It's probably more like 5, 6, 7 years. So I think you get a little bit longer runway with a guy like Bijan, who is not going to flame out in 3 years, barring some catastrophic injury. So yeah, I think Bijan is just the safer play there. And I would want to, have kind of that safer pillar for my rebuild.
And if he climbs to his top, you can trade him for better than Drake May.
Yeah, that's right. By the way, I do agree. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Different scenarios.
Being a good host.
Yeah,
that's what you're doing, Warren.
Yeah,
what you're supposed to do. Great job.
I appreciate that. Were there any examples from this year? I mean, you mentioned kind of Marvin Harrison and Jane Daniels. I'm trying to think lower down, like Neighbors over.
I think Brooks goes over like Brock Bowers a bunch, and I love Brooks, but that's example. Not anything I would ever do if I'm in a rebuild. I want the higher ceiling player every time, so I'm taking Bowers every single time over Jonathan Brooks.
Bowers is a perfect example. I was like not understanding why Bowers is falling out of the top 8 in a lot of my rookie drafts, because I know why it happened because of the landing spot, but I'm like, this dude is like one of the 4 best players in this class, like at a position that's sometimes difficult to fill. Like, I will just happily take him if he's falling. So I think that's a great call. Quick note for everybody on the draft assistant. Remember when you first started playing fantasy football? It was fun, right? Now your draft can feel like you're studying for a math test. This year, reclaim that same enjoyment with Draft Assistant. Draft Assistant simplifies the entire draft process, making it the easy way to dominate your fantasy draft. It connects to your draft, keeps track of everything that's going on, and tells you who the best pick is when you're on the clock. All you have to focus on is the excitement of making the perfect pick. So this season, work less and win more with Draft Assistant. All right, guys, let's get to Bogman's next piece of advice.
I'm going to say spend that FAAB early in the season. And I have a couple of examples that worked out last year. And of course, you want to spend on the younger players that are performing well first if you're rebuilding, because they're going to give you the longest runway. But I would also spend money on vets to then take and trade later if these guys are doing well. So last season, Achan in the first month was second. Puka was in there. Nico Collins was fifth in half point PPR per game. Achan finished fourth per game. Nico finished sixth per game. Puka finished seventh per game in terms of points per game. We had some vets in there too. Mostert, Zach Moss, Adam Thielen finished as a 31st. He was 13th at the beginning of the season, but that's when you need to trade him. Is you get him and he's a top, a borderline wide receiver one that first month of the season in points per game, and now you can flip him. He finished not as good, but still a top 3 asset. So you're buying assets for free with your FAAB on your team that you didn't have to draft and then to flip later. Or if you're getting the young guys, maybe they're going to last and they can be late round picks or not worth a lot of money, depending on your format of auction or draft or however it is. I think spending that money early is what you need to do. Because you're going to get some guys that can help you for the whole season, or you can get guys at their peak and then trade them before they fall off. So I just think spending FAAB early is important if you're rebuilding.
Fitz, what's your FAAB strategy?
Well, Boggs, you did mention a lot of guys who probably were not available on waivers. Maybe Puka, if he slid through the cracks in a rookie drafts or whatever. But like I generally agree with the premise. Like I would rather spread my bets around and do it kind of early in a season with my FAAB money than like go all in on one guy who maybe like makes a big splash early. Although I suppose if someone like Puka was there, that would backfire on me because you would love to have Puka as that main piece. But
And Achan got dumped. He was drafted and then dumped by a lot of people too, because he wasn't going to play super early. Right. So
yeah, I mean, maybe like in the shallower leagues, I can see it. I mean, in shallower leagues, some of those guys maybe were available. Like in the ones I'm typically in, the 12 teamers where you've got 28 or 30 man rosters, maybe not. But like in those, the waiver wire can be tumbleweeds for the most part. So like I want to throw some darts and give these guys a chance to hit. And like we're probably not going to hit absolute gold on any of these guys, but like we're looking for useful pieces. And the nice thing about spending it early, you've got the season to see if these guys start to materialize and maybe find themselves in larger roles, either through, injury attrition or just from performing well and like practices and everything, sort of moving up the depth chart a little bit. Yeah, I mean, like better to have these guys early, because if you are adding guys on FAAB in December, you're not going to have any idea what you have as you get into the off season. Then you're going to be drafting rookies and you're going to have to make room for them by cutting people. And you're not going to know whether to hang on to these guys you picked up late in the year.
Fitz, let's stick with you for your next piece of advice.
Trade running backs for wide receivers of commensurate value. Running backs just age better than running backs. Wide receivers age better than running backs. Boggs and I talk about this all the time with the way we value players. And so much of running back value is based on opportunity. Running back opportunity can be fleeting and just fluctuate wildly. Like a team built around wide receivers is likely to be pretty sturdy, whereas a team built around running backs is just a house of cards. Because if a couple of your key running backs go down, or if they suddenly lose their jobs, you take a big hit in the overall value of your roster. So I always emphasize the wide receiver position when I'm rebuilding, and running backs are usually the last thing that I'm trying to get right.
I think that's a similar strategy that a lot of people have, is sort of like running backs being the final piece of the puzzle. Do you, Fitz, see any value in maybe zigging while others zag if that becomes too popular of an opinion? Like I just did a slow startup draft in this last few weeks, and I was kind of thinking, I didn't end up doing this just because of the nature of the players that were available to me, but I was almost thinking like maybe I should take more running backs earlier than I kind of anticipated if everybody else is kind of going with the same strategy of running backs last. Like maybe they start to turn into values. Do you see kind of leaning the other way with this strategy, where if everybody is saying, hey, I want to trade my running backs for your receivers because they're more valuable, maybe it makes sense to just kind of dominate the running back position for a couple of years? What do you think about that?
I mean, if I'm getting better than commensurate value, yeah, I'll consider it. Like if I'm basically if someone's willing to trade me a, really spicy, intriguing running back prospect for some mediocre veteran at receiver, sure, you might pique my interest. But for the most part, if there's like what's considered to be balanced based on people's rankings and the trade calculators, like I'm probably not taking the running back for a wide receiver in any instance where I think they're generally valued about the same. But if I think I'm getting a little bit of an edge in the trade, sure.
Bogman, I feel like with this strategy, I try and come away for my rebuilding rosters. I like to have 2 receivers for every running back on my roster, assuming benches are large enough for me to do that. I just want to throw more darts at it, honestly, as a position. And of course, if you're talking about the bigger names, like trading like Jonathan Taylor for Amon-Ra St. Brown or something like that, well, like sure, that's like kind of a different story, like getting one of those elite guys. But even at the back end of the roster, like I'm trying to take more swings at the receiver position.
Yeah, and it just makes sense strategy wise. The wide receivers are the foundations. They're going to last longer, and a lot of the times for people that are a piece away or a couple bench spots away or whatever, they're willing to do a 1-for-1 trade like Fitz is talking about here. So take advantage of that and get a foundational piece for a rental, which is basically what you're doing in flipping those guys, because wide receivers have much longer careers in general than running backs.
Now, Bogman, your next piece of advice here is about how to approach trading in general.
Yeah, I would say hold out for a little more if you're the rebuilding team. Now, look, you don't want to outkick your coverage and ask for too much. If you're only negotiating with one team and you guys are back and forth and it seems like they're going to hold out for, whatever it is, okay, you're not negotiating with anybody else. Do that trade. But if you have multiple offers for one player and you're not sure, you don't risk anything by saying, you know what, we're close, but I want an add-on. I want a tack on. I want something a little bit more, because it doesn't matter to me. I'm already going to lose. So I can lose with this guy on my roster and you can lose too. Give me back that extra pick. And that gives you an extra shot to try to rebuild your roster, whether it's, a bench player that you want, a, low draft pick that you want. If you want to bump a third to a second, whatever it is, just hold out for a little bit more, because when you're trading away players, when you're selling, you are in the power position there, because it doesn't make any difference to you whether your team is a little bit worse because your team is bad. You're rebuilding. So hold out for a little bit more and squeeze them for everything they're worth, but also expect it to be done the other way to you when you're winning. You have to pay a little bit extra to put yourself over the top. That should be how the market always works.
Do you sometimes feel like, and again, to kind of play devil's advocate, do you sometimes feel like, Bogman, like there is value to you, not just in the return you're getting, but in getting that player off your team if you're trying to lose? For example, like this year, if I really needed a quarterback and I was trying to tank, like going into this past season, I would have really wanted the first pick because I would have really wanted Caleb Williams. So getting somebody like an aging, like let's say Derrick Henry off my team would actually, there would be inherent value, because it would maybe prevent him from accidentally winning me a week that then costs me Caleb Williams. Do you ever think about that, looking at it through that prism as well?
No, because I think if Derrick Henry has like a couple big weeks, then I can trade him for more than I was going to trade him for last week. So not really when it comes to that. I will say I hate going back and forth 100 times because I have so many teams. So I don't want to play the 300 email game to get a deal done with you. I think that is more of what I'm looking for. Like, bring me close to your best offer immediately. I don't want to go back and forth. I don't want to start super low and not even be close, but maybe I'll ask you for one more little thing on top. So I think that is more valuable to me.
Fitz, we've joked before that like a 3rd round rookie draft pick is kind of the perfect add-on, because it's good enough to be like, okay, yeah, 3rd round, there'll be some good players there, but it's late enough to be like, okay, I can part with that. At least I'm not giving up a 1st or a 2nd rounder. So when you're holding out for trades, it's something like a rookie 3rd round pick, jokes aside, something that you are looking to add on, or if you're trying to hold out a little more, are you trying to get more of a better player rather than an additional piece?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Like I kind of have a distaste for haggling, and I get Bogman's point about holding out for stuff, but Bogman also made the point about not wanting to go back and forth with emails with someone when, I'm managing like however many dynasty teams I have, 13, 14. So yeah, like I don't haggle a lot, but Bogman also mentioned something else earlier. Like when you're talking to a guy, when you're in a rebuild, people know you're holding a fire sale, or at least they should know you're holding a fire sale. Let them know. Let them know that this player is going to get moved one way or the other, and he can either wind up on your roster or he can wind up on someone else's roster. And that might be the thing that gives, the person you're negotiating with the impetus to, of their own volition, rather than you asking for something. Maybe they'll give you a little something extra without you even asking.
That's the nicest threat. That's the nicest way I've heard a threat explained to me ever, Fitzy. Is if you don't get them, I'm gonna sell them to whoever's number 2 here, just so you know. So better give me that 3rd round pick. That's what I want. Everybody knows that's what I want.
Speaking of 3rd round picks, this is like a total aside, but I wanted to ask you guys, and we have the time to do it. I became a commissioner in a dynasty league for the first time this year. Obviously, I've played in a bunch, but I finally just kind of started my own with my own group of people. And what is the right number of rookie draft rounds in your eyes? It's typically 4 or 5. I've played in like half the leagues I'm in, I've only 4. Half of them have 5. Do you guys think that there's like a best number of rookie draft picks per? And it's a pretty standard league all the way around in other areas. But I've been trying to decide how many rounds I want the rookie drafts to be. What do you guys think?
I like 5, but if rosters are 26 players or fewer, I would maybe consider going 4.
Yeah, I think 5 is usually the marker, but 4, like Fitz said, if you're, bumping up against those bench spots, you should have more in dynasty. But if you don't, then I think 3 is okay if you have a really limited bench. But 5 is what I want.
I've primarily always done 5, but in the last couple of years, a lot of my new ones have only been 4. So that's why I bring it up. I don't know if there was kind of like maybe a shift in what people are doing typically, or if that's just a small sample size and it happens.
I have a league where we have too many and people were skipping their picks at the end just because they didn't have roster space. So
one of our Fantasy Pros dynasty leagues, we've got 6, and at the end it's always like the unrostered veterans are going. Alan Lazard is the 6th round pick. Like, come on, let's just cut it off at 5.
Nobody needs to be here anymore. By now, most of you have probably heard of Reality Sports Online, the powerful fantasy sports platform where owners get to build and manage their fantasy team like an NFL general manager. But the question is, have you tried it? It's time to go see what all the buzz in the Dynasty community is about. Free agency, multi-year contracts, a rookie draft, multi-team trades, franchise tags, contract extensions, first-round rookie options, automated contract and salary cap functionality, and much, much more. Think it sounds complicated? It's not. The best thing about Reality Sports Online Fantasy Front Office is that it doesn't take any more time than a standard league. It just requires more strategy. Think you're among the fantasy elite? Well, this is the platform to test your mettle. Still not sure? You can test out your general manager skills for free in a mock free agency auction. If you like what you see, use promo code FANTASYPROS to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. That's promo code FANTASYPROS to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. Fantasy just got real at realitysportsonline.com. All right, Fitz, what is your next piece of advice?
To buy injured players at discount prices. And last year, you probably could have gotten discounts on TJ Hawkinson, Cooper Kupp, Daniel Jones, to a lesser extent, guys like Mike Williams, Greg Dulcich. And then I think back to like Jameson Williams rookie, maybe, I don't know. I guess people drafted him knowing that he was going to miss a big chunk of his rookie season. But the point definitely stands on guys like Hawkinson and Cooper Kupp and Daniel Jones. Like if you get guys right when they're hurt, they're eventually going to come back and be something. And maybe they're going to not be what they were in their pre-injured lives, but they're still going to be like supporting players and key guys, and you can get them at a massive discount if you trade for them when they're hurt. So like you feel pretty good right now about having Hawkinson, on your roster after maybe getting him for a second rounder. Or, Cooper Kupp. I don't know, that the Cooper Kupp manager might have taken a couple of thirds for him last year when he was probably starting to wonder if he might ever play again. So there are bargains to be had. And one right now, like, I would maybe float an offer to whoever's holding Keaton Mitchell, maybe offer an older veteran who might be useful this year. Cause like, we don't know when Mitchell is going to come back. He's going to have a very small, insignificant role, I would expect, behind Derrick Henry when he does come back. But down the road, 2-3 years from now, maybe Keaton Mitchell turns into something. And, if you can sell off, some, Elijah Moore type veteran or someone for him, go for it.
Those guys can be the toss in on what I just talked about too, of like you holding out for a little bit more. You can be like, well, look, if you won't give me that 3rd round pick that everybody wants because you've already traded it, then maybe give me one of these guys on your IR who you're not using this year at all, obviously, and, add them to the trade. So I like that idea as well, Fitz.
Yeah, and on the other side, like for contenders, it's good advice to be willing to move those guys, because like a lot of times if you are trying to buy to go all in and win now, like on the baseball side, like, I'm looking to give away prospects to try and get win now players who are in the big leagues. So the equivalent of that in the NFL is younger guys who maybe just need their role to expand next year. Like you expect them to do that. Injured guys are a good piece as well to kind of be willing to part with and say, I'm trying to win now. This is just going to work for everybody all the way around. It helps the rebuilding team because they'll be better for them next year. It helps me because I get somebody who can actually win now. And there's a whole lot more injuries on the football side than the baseball example. So you will definitely find opportunities to do this.
One little add-on point there, like dynasty commissioners have this bad habit of like having massive numbers of IR spots. And so you can park these guys on IR spots, but when you have all these IR spots, that lets people pick up all these players off waivers. And in leagues with a lot of IR spots, the waiver wire is tumbleweeds. Like there is nothing available. So you can put TJ Hawkinson on IR, but you're not going to get any sort of usable tight end for him. Now, if you've got someone willing to give you like a usable tight end in the here and now last year, like if someone, I don't know if you're taking Tyler Conklin for TJ Hawkinson, but maybe last year, if someone were to offer you, I don't know, Luke Musgrave.
Likely. Yeah.
Yeah. Or likely someone who's young and maybe has a plausible upside and is producing now. Musgrave was a bad example, I guess, because he was hurt last year, but Isaiah Likely was a very good example. Like maybe someone makes that move because they were getting nothing, obviously. Well, maybe that Hawkinson isn't the best. Since he got hurt late in the year, I'm giving all sorts of bad
but we get your point. The point is trade the guy that's hurt for the guy that's not, and take the upgrade eventually. You don't need him right now, so you will take the upgrade now for the guy that's producing now. So I think your point is still fair.
I did say at the top of the show, this is like a macro level, like general advice and like strategies, not about specific players. So don't worry that you kind of couldn't land on the right player for player example. The ultimate point.
Yeah, that was the opposite of sticking the landing. That was the gymnast who dismounts and like stumbles into the stands.
That would be if I attempted to dismount in the gymnastics at the Olympics. All right, Bogman, what's your next advice for rebuilding teams?
My next one is look for backups on the last year, to guys that are on the last year of their deal, right? And it doesn't have to be the last year of their deal too, because like Joe Mixon was traded in the offseason, but Joe Mixon almost got cut last offseason. So it was kind of like they're either going to trade him or cut him this year. And that netted me Chase Brown for $5 in an auction league, by the way, this year. So do little moves like that. And I have some examples, guys that are on 1-year deals this year. James Conner, obviously Trey Benson is behind him, but DeMarcado has a role. So if you're in a deep league, maybe he's an ad, or someone, Michael Carter's still on that roster. Maybe someone steps up at the end of the year. Nick Chubb, Javonte Williams, Najee, J.K. Dobbins, all guys that are on 1-year contracts. And then there's guys that are easy to dump next year, like Most Hurt, Gus Edwards, David Montgomery. These are all guys that are cuttable. So if you see someone in a, that could be looking for a decent sized role in the following season, maybe do that. A couple wide receivers, Diggs, Higgins, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Godwin, Deontay, Hopkins, all on 1-year deals. And the tight ends, Conklin, Ertz, Gesicki, all on 1-year deals. So, just look at those guys at the end of the year, see who's behind them. Maybe they're going to make some waves and add them. And you can, depending on how your league formats, either you may have a guy that's a starter or you may have a guy that's a keeper option for you for super cheap, a late draft pick or a late amount of money like I did with Chase Brown.
I think Ricky Pearsall, a good example in rookie drafts this year. Now, it might end up being that he has an opportunity sooner than expected. As of the time we're recording this, which is earlier in the week, Brandon Ayuk is still on the Niners. But if that changes, then all of a sudden he's going to look better early. But even if it doesn't change, you have a pretty good feeling that he's going to look pretty good a year from now. So I think he's another good example of somebody like that. How often do you kind of use this approach, Fitz, in terms of aiming to get somebody who's a year away from a bigger role?
Yeah, not enough. I mean, it's a really good point by Boggs, and I don't look at that closely enough. But I feel great now because I feel like Bogman is giving me a pep talk for all my Andre Iosivas shares.
Yeah.
So now I'm pretty fired up.
Jermaine Burton in one of them.
No, not Burton. It's all Andre. It's Andre season, baby.
Quick note for everyone to join our Fantasy Pros Discord community, chat with other fans, and get exclusive access to AMAs that wind up on our podcast feed. You can join the fun with Joe, Welsh, and Boggs Mondays at 2 Eastern, Fitz and Boggs Tuesdays at 5 Eastern, and Welsh and Erickson Thursdays at 3 Eastern, plus just like all the AMAs that are constantly going on, in their own channels and constantly answering questions. The whole team is in the Discord all the time, really, let alone just these shows. But if you're on those shows, you can come get your questions answered and be on the show on our podcast feed. That's at fantasypros.com/chat. All right, one more piece of advice each. Fitz, what do you got?
Don't start the rebuild too late. And I am guilty of this in one league, my Overtime Ireland Dynasty League, which I play in with. I think I might be one of 2 Americans in this Dynasty League. It's a bunch of lovely Irish fellas. And I won this league, I want to say, in 2020. And, felt like I was ready to contend again in 2021. And I can't remember whether I made the playoffs, but it was a good team. But 2022, my team was starting to it was starting to decay pretty rapidly. I hung on thinking I could continue to contend and did not really start the rebuild in earnest until 2023. And now I am presiding over quite possibly the worst dynasty roster I have ever had. And now I'm in a full-on multi-year rebuild project. Like, this is a fetid swamp of a team, a county landfill of just has-beens and never was players.
So you showed him the American side champ. Now you're showing him the Oakland A's.
Yes, exactly. So, after that 2020 title, I don't know. I was just feeling my oats, and I started the rebuild at least a year too late, and I am paying for it now.
I love this advice. I hope all the rebuilding managers in the leagues I play in are hearing it, because I can't tell you how frustrating it is to send a trade offer to someone and be like, oh, well, this guy is good. I'm trying to win this year. I'm like, my guy, your team is terrible. You have 2 good players. You should be I don't want to tell you how to run your team, but you should be trading this guy. He is of no value to you and your timeline. And it's frustrating on the contending side, and it can really hurt you on the rebuilding side. I think self-awareness and self-evaluation, knowing how to correctly and accurately analyze your own team and players, is arguably the most valuable skill in Dynasty, honestly. If you're not a great college player evaluator, fine. You can read rankings from people who watch a lot of college football and can tell you who these good rookies are. If you find that you're not good at, so whatever, there are tools out there to help you. Knowing your team and knowing what direction you should be going in is so valuable, and so many people just don't, that it can be quite frustrating to other people in the league, including myself. I've definitely experienced that, but I won't shout anybody out by name who has frustrated me in that way. Bogman, what are your thoughts on this?
I think this is advice that I need, right? Because I have definitely been the hard-headed guy where I look at my roster and I go, this is actually still pretty good. I think I'm going to win with this. And then I have, 2 injuries and one of my guys does not perform like he should, and I am rebuilding. It's not up to me anymore. It's what your roster is telling you you are doing. And, I think recognizing it is the big thing too. It's, I've started 0-4. Did I start 0-4 because I played the 4 best teams in the league, or did I start 0-4 because my team sucks and maybe I need to do something about it? So I think just having more self-awareness is probably good. And if you're not sure, ask somebody to say, hey, look, this is a roster I've got. This is where I am. This is my record. We answer a lot of those questions on Discord as well. So we'd love to hear them.
Honest self-assessments are key for sure. Like, I mean, Christian Kirk is a fine player, but if he is your number 1 wide receiver and you are in a 10-team dynasty league and other guys are sitting on receiver groups of Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, and AJ Brown, you are not going to win a championship. You have to know that.
That's the other thing I was going to say is like looking at other teams too. Like there's a work dynasty league that I used to be in with one of our coworkers, Michael, on the product team, Fitz, and he has the most ludicrously loaded dynasty roster I have ever seen. He has like 5 of the top 10 running backs, 8 of the top 10 receivers, Jalen Hurts. Like his team is absolutely insane. And that makes it really easy to say, listen, like, unless my team is also loaded, I don't have a chance here. And I think it's important to remember that. Like, and put another way, more on the rebuilding side, like, don't fall in love with your players too much. Like you should know that not every player on your roster is likely to be there on your next contending team. In fact, they shouldn't be. Otherwise, you'd be a contender now. So, like, be willing to move on from guys and don't. Like, I even found this with the startup that I just mentioned. Like, I went into it with I'm going to compete in year 2. A productive struggle strategy was what I kind of fell into with my first couple of picks. And then we finished the draft and I'm looking at the team and I'm like, man, I don't know if Olave takes that leap, like, if with the new offense and if Trey Benson can supplant James Conner, this team could continue. No, I went into this knowing that these were a lot of players that were going to be better in year 2. Don't now sell the farm because I'm starting to fall in love with the players that are now on my roster. I think that's a really important.
Count your ifs. Count your ifs. And if it's more than 4, great probably call. Not going to work. So
yeah, count your ifs. I love that. All right. Last piece of advice here, Bogman.
I'm going to say to listen to trade offers from other rebuilding teams, because I think sometimes we get the people that are overzealous in their fire sales of, like, especially when you have an orphan and a new person comes in and takes that team and it's not the guys that they want, they will fire sale. They will move pretty much everybody on their roster, and they might be giving away some players too cheap. It might be like going to a garage sale and seeing somebody doesn't know what they really have, and you're going to pick it up for $10 and resell it for $100. You know what I mean? So I think that happens a lot. I think, sometimes even a scenario where Worm described, where it was like, I don't want Derrick Henry clogging up my roster, making my team good, because I want to sink to the bottom. So I'll sell this guy for cheaper than I should. Look, if you're offering a 2nd round pick and your team is bad, your 2nd round pick is worth more. So you're going to leap ahead of some of those teams. And you can be like, all right, well, you're willing to do your 2. Are you willing to do your 2 and an add-on, an extra draft pick? Are you willing to do your 1st if I add on a 3rd here? Whatever it is, you can trade up by listening to some of those fire sale teams and taking advantage when they're trading somebody too low. And sometimes you just want to get a guy off your roster because you want to sink to the bottom and it's too low. So I'd say listen to those trade offers too. Don't say I'm not a buyer because my team is bad. If someone is selling something too cheap, buy it and resell it for more. That's what I would say.
Fitz, what do you think about this one?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there could be another rebuilding team selling, say Chase Brown, who they're not that interested in. And obviously I'm really interested in Chase Brown. So I take it. I like Boggs' rummage sale analogy. Sometimes people put out the shoebox full of baseball cards and, ooh, there's a rookie Mickey Mantle card in here. I'm $1 for this entire shoebox. Okay. So yeah, I agree with that. And that's kind of a sneaky good bit of advice, because it's true. You never know what another rebuilding team might be willing to part with.
Not just listening. The way this is phrased is listen to trade offers from other rebuilding teams. Go seek them out. Go when you're looking to sell. Don't just look at the contenders. Look at everybody's roster and say, hey, we might actually be a match, even if we're both not trying to contend. So not just listening to trade offers from them, but I think seeking it out and kind of like turning over every stone to try and see how you can improve your team, I think is really valuable there as well, and kind of along those same vein. Before we get out of here, any kind of other overarching thoughts on just rebuilding teams and the approach you should have and what you can do to either speed along your, rebuilding window and get back into contention, or at least make sure you're really effectively doing so and not aiming for fourth or fifth, but really aiming for first or second? Any other kind of macro level thoughts, Fitz?
I'm actually, you mentioned speeding it along. I kind of focus more on getting it right. Like I'm not hell bent on setting a timetable on a rebuild, like 1 year or whatever. Like you have to know that sometimes in certain situations, it's going to take 2, or in the worst cases, like with my dumpster fire of a team in that league with all the Irishmen, it might take 3 years. So commit to the long haul, and rebuilding is actually kind of fun. So, enjoy the process.
I like that point about it being fun. Like across my multiple dynasty leagues, I kind of enjoy having at least one that's rebuilding, because it's just fun to like be really excited about the rookies. Like this last year, I was contending in every one except for one, but the one I was rebuilding in, I had 4 first-round picks. So rookie draft season was super fun for me, because I was imagining all the different iterations that could, look for me on rookie draft day. So that I like that point about like winning is ultimately the most fun, but sometimes rebuilding is too.
It's less stressful than being like having that team, should win a title and trying to like get every last piece, right? It's like trying to, board up for a hurricane. Like what possible, I need to put hammer plywood into place everywhere here and make sure there are no holes whatsoever. But like rebuilding's fun. Trying to put the finishing touches on a title team is stressful.
Well, what's the appeal of Dynasty, right? It's the team building, it's the roster construction, it's getting to play GM, and it's more fun when you can do that across the team and kind of shape it into your vision, rather than like, hey, this is pretty much set. I know my top 4 receivers, I know my 2 quarterbacks, like maybe looking for one piece. And again, ultimately it is fun to win. We're competitive. You might maybe win money. Like this is why we're doing this, but it is fun from the armchair GM perspective to be like, I have full control. It's a blank slate, and that can be really appealing. So kind of embrace that fun and embrace the rebuild, I think is like kind of maybe a good sneaky 11th piece of advice here. Bogman, any other kind of macro level thoughts from you?
I mean, I like that, what you guys just said, because I mean, that is why everyone is starting at a small school in NCAA, right? Now that the game is back out, everybody wants to rebuild that school into a winner. So that is part of the fun of doing it. And you can absolutely have a lot of fun rebuilding an orphan team. I'll say this, I don't like to strip it all the way down to the nuts and bolts, because not most draft classes are like they were this year, with an absolute abundance of talent all the way throughout the draft. This next class might be one of those that, is just okay, especially on the quarterback front. So if I can not strip it all the way down to the bare bones, the winds change in the NFL. Jerry Glanville taught us this a long time ago from NFL Films, right? The NFL stands for not for long. So your luck can change real quick on a dime. So I don't want to strip it all the way down to the nuts and bolts unless I'm getting a rookie class like we had this year, and I don't know when the next one is going to happen. So I would say tear it down, but don't tear it down to the base.
All right, we'll get out of there on that note. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in for this week's episode. For Fitz and Bogman, I'm Ryan Wormeli, and we'll see you again next week.